It was a typical Friday evening at Bella's Pizza Haven, and the atmosphere was calm. The air was filled with the familiar sounds of clattering kitchenware, soft chatter from customers, and the hum of the overhead lights. It wasn't the busiest night, but the steady flow of phone orders kept the crew engaged. I had been answering calls for a couple of hours, and while it was a fairly routine shift, something about tonight felt different. Little did I know, it would turn into a night I would never forget. I answered the next incoming call, my voice slipping into the practiced tone I always used. "Thanks for calling Bella's Pizza Haven. How may I help you?" The voice on the other end of the line sounded a bit chipper, almost eager, as though they were excited to speak to me. "Yes, I'd like to place an order. I'll have a large cheese pizza with extra mushrooms, a side of garlic bread, and a 2-liter soda." "Got it," I responded quickly, jotting down the details. The order was simple enough. "Anything else for you tonight?" I asked, expecting the usual follow-up of drinks or perhaps a dessert. But this time, there was a long pause on the other end. It wasn't uncommon for customers to take a moment, perhaps deciding whether or not to add one more item. But after a beat, the voice spoke again, now with a hint of mischief. "Actually, yes," the caller said, their tone shifting. "I'd like to ask for something a little unconventional." Intrigued, I leaned forward into the phone, curious about what they might ask. "Sure, I'm happy to help. What can I do for you?" The voice on the other end grew more animated, as though they were outlining something they had thought through carefully. "Well, I was hoping you could pass along some very specific instructions to the delivery driver when they arrive." Now, I'd been doing this job long enough to know that I'd heard some odd requests. Pizza delivery had a reputation for attracting the strange and bizarre, but this one, based on the caller's tone, sounded like it could take the cake. I raised an eyebrow but decided to humor them, figuring it would be one of those quirky, funny guy moments. "I'll be your driver, by the way," I clarified, keeping the conversation casual. "You're speaking to me right now." "Perfect," the caller responded almost immediately, without hesitation. "Then here's what I need you to do. When you arrive at my house, I want you to knock on the window 3 times. It has to be 3 knocks, no more, no less." I furrowed my brow slightly, mentally taking note of the unusual request. "Okay," I said slowly, jotting down the instruction. "Knock 3 times? Got it. What's next?" The caller's voice now held a sense of excitement, almost as if they were rehearsing the steps in their head. "After the 3 knocks, I need you to yell like a Wookiee from Star Wars. You know, like Chewbacca's growl. Make it loud and growly." I paused, trying to process what I had just heard. "Yell like a Wookiee?" I repeated, incredulous. The idea of a pizza driver growling like a Wookiee on someone's front porch seemed, well, bizarre. "Yes, exactly," the caller said, now sounding more satisfied with the request. "You can do it, right? Just channel your inner Chewbacca and give it your best roar." I couldn't help but laugh under my breath, wondering if this was some kind of prank. But at the same time, I wasn't about to back down from a challenge. I mean, what was the worst that could happen? "Sure, I can do that. Anything else?" I asked, curious about how far this strange request would go. There was another brief pause, and when the caller spoke again, their voice took on an almost conspiratorial tone, like they were letting me in on an inside joke. "Yes, after the Wookiee growl, I need you to knock twice more. Then I need you to make alien noises. You know, like the clicking sound the aliens make in Signs." "Signs?" I repeated, trying to recall the movie in question. "You want me to do the clicking sound like in Signs?" "Yes, exactly," the caller said, their excitement growing as they outlined the bizarre sequence of events. "You know how the aliens make that click-click-click sound? It's iconic. Just like that. After the clicks, knock 3 more times and then you have to shout plankton really loudly. It's the final touch to the whole thing." I was speechless for a moment. "Wait," I said, trying to clarify. You want me to shout plankton after all of that? The caller laughed. Yes, I promise you it'll be hilarious. Imagine the look on my friends' faces when you do it. It'll be perfect. I was starting to realize that this was no ordinary customer. This was someone who had planned out every little detail for a reason, and they weren't going to settle for anything less than full commitment. I wasn't sure if they were just eccentric or if I was the target of an elaborate prank, but I figured I might as well go along with it. After all, what was the harm in a little harmless fun? All right, is there anything else I need to know? I asked, bracing myself for the next strange request. The caller hesitated for a moment, as though something had just occurred to them. Actually, yes. Do you, by any chance, sell lingerie? I blinked, slightly thrown off guard by the sudden shift in direction. Lingerie? No. We don't sell that here, I replied, uncertain of where this was going. We're a pizza place, not a lingerie store. Oh, that's too bad, the caller responded, their tone laced with mild disappointment. Well, here's an idea. Why don't you go home, get some lingerie, and wear it when you come to the door? It'll make the whole thing a lot more fun. Trust me. I was momentarily speechless. What had I just signed myself up for? I glanced around the room to make sure no one had overheard me. I don't know about that, I said, unsure whether they were being serious. But I'll do my best to make this a memorable experience. With the order details confirmed, I ended the call and leaned back in my chair, shaking my head in disbelief. What had just happened? I still wasn't sure if this was a prank, an inside joke, or just some wild customer with a great imagination. Either way, I was in for an interesting night. As the evening wore on, I prepared for the delivery. The customer's instructions were so outlandish that I figured the only way to truly follow through was to take it to the next level. I went home after my shift and, in the spirit of compliance and maybe a little curiosity, I found an old pair of shorts. They weren't exactly lingerie, but by rolling the legs up to look like a makeshift Speedo, I figured it was close enough. Besides, it wasn't like anyone was going to recognize me. Half an hour later, I arrived at the address. The house was well lit, and I could see a group of people standing on the porch waiting for the show. They were all laughing and chatting as I approached, and I could sense their excitement in the air. When I walked up to the front door, the entire group burst into laughter, as though they had been anticipating this moment all night. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and went into full performance mode. First, I knocked 3 times on the window, just as requested. The crowd watched eagerly. Then, I did my best Wookiee growl, loud, guttural, and as convincing as I could manage. The group's laughter grew louder as they watched me perform. I could feel the energy of the crowd boosting my confidence. Next, I knocked twice more and began making the clicking sounds from signs, doing my best to get them right. I could hear the group gasping with excitement as I continued. By now, I had fully embraced the absurdity of it all, and I felt like I was in a comedy sketch. Finally, I knocked 3 more times, turned to the crowd, and yelled as loudly as I could, "Plankton!" The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers and laughter ringing in my ears. They even started taking pictures with me, posing around me like I was some kind of guest of honor. When it was all over, one of the group members handed me a $15 tip. It wasn't much, but given the sheer ridiculousness of the request, it felt like a small fortune for the performance I had just put on. I couldn't help but laugh to myself as I walked back to my car. What had just happened? I had gone from delivering a simple pizza to putting on an impromptu comedy show for a group of strangers. That night, as I drove home, I realized that sometimes the most unexpected moments lead to the best stories. The bizarre request had turned into an unforgettable experience, and I had somehow come out of it with a decent tip and a story to tell for years to come. What a night it had been.